for women's economic empowerment in challenging contexts. We'll have only 2 presentations, and for that reason, we are hoping that we can end this session by, let's say, 5 p.m. because it has been a long day. So the first presentation will be by Sebina on gender and artisanal and small-scale mining in Central and East Africa. So please, go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that at that time we're all kind of really sleeping a little bit, okay? So if everybody could stand up, just stand up.
Nearer.
And you just do
near.
what I do. At the same time.
I'd like to start, or both of us would like to start by sharing our experiences in this field. First, mine is just an observation from since we came. And I would like to say that we all assume different identities in different places. So maybe we are here as development workers, as women activists, as academicians, and as parents, as anything we can come up with. So one time, sometime back, talking to colleagues as parents, a colleague commented and said, okay, it's only when I saw my son when he was a toddler that I discovered myself. So 2 nights ago, I've been talking to people and they said, oh, what are you presenting? And I said, women in artisanal mining. I said, what? Women in mining? You know, I could see the expression from several colleagues I talked to, and I realized myself, before I started working in this field, what my reaction was. Just couldn't imagine women in mining. And I realized that maybe half of us here just cannot visualize, image this concept of women in mining. So that is my experience since I came. But I think Giselle also has her own experience about women in mining.
It was a really long time ago. It was in 1988. The first time I went to Peru. My companion is Peruvian. We have kids together. They have grown half of the time in Quebec and half of the time in Peru. And the first job I got, I was supposed to work with a small association promoting workers' rights, but it didn't work out. So finally I had a job with an association called Sebina-Zziwa. And these women were all women miners who had decided to organize themselves as an association. After long marches of protest from the women from the small scale and medium scale mining in Peru, and the march of protest or march of sacrifice that we call it, is they walk from really long place like in the Andes, very difficult, and they would walk with all the community, with the women in front, with the children, and they would go down to the capital to claim their rights. Right to education, right to education. And then I asked, why is it called Sebina-Zziwa? And it's because 2 years ago, 2 years before, during one of these long sacrifice marches, I said, what happened to the child? The child was this association had decided to be helping that child so she could get access to education. So that was my first encounter with that world, and I discovered marvelous women working hard, and they were able and they were very well organized, claiming their rights.
Thank you. What she didn't say that was 1978. We tend to think that women are just getting into the mining sector, but actually they have been there, except that we are getting to have them be visible in the whole trade. Split this. Okay, our project, as the title says, it's Women in Artisanal and Small-Scale Mining, ASM, Challenges and Possibilities. And the outline of the presentation, we have 7 sections. I'm going to go over the study sites, the objectives and methods, the results, which are very preliminary, and the potential uptake of the findings. And then we make just conclusions. Am I the one flipping or you're flipping? Okay, this is taking place we call it in Central and Eastern Africa. Central is the Congo part, the DRC, and east is the Rwanda and Uganda. So we are looking at minerals, two types of minerals, 3 types of minerals. And here in Central Africa, we are doing 4 mine sites. And in Rwanda, we are doing 2 mine sites. And in Uganda, we are also doing 2 mine sites. We are looking at gold, tin, tungsten, tin and tantalum, and gold in DRC. These are high demand minerals, and with that, there are many other things that follow, conflicts and death and things like that. So we would like to highlight the outstanding characteristics for each site. And this is important because of the location and the different aspects that follow, or different challenges that come with the location and the prevailing activities there. I can't see there. I have to look here. Yeah. So we have, in DRC, we have the Ituri province and the South Kivu. Some of these, what is happening there is related to the mining and what happened in the pre-colonial period and colonial period. In Ituri, we have the mining takes place under some licenses. It is customary land. It takes place on customary land. This is not gazetted land, but people just find themselves sitting on some minerals somewhere. And it's a multi-ethnic group, and there is insecurity all surrounding that area. As we all know, there has been fighting back and forth in DRC. In South Kivu, a similar thing. Customary, there are chiefs there who really play a big role in these activities. And in that area, unlike the other parts, there are more women visible than there are the men. They are also surrounded by armed groups, and they are women shaft owners. They really, have their hands on the minerals. In Rwanda, we covered the southern province of Rwanda. In that part is being operated under a licensed company. Mining is organized through subcontracts, and miners are paid a fixed daily rate. So it is, that's what you call medium scale. It's not really small, so medium scale. In this northern province, there is the same situation applies. A licensed company, the site is both artisanal and semi-industrial, and mining is organized through subcontractors. In Uganda, we have two sites. We have the gold site and the tin site. And the gold site, which is in central region, it is also multi-ethnic. It's a gold rush site, and the uniqueness about that is the minerals are sitting on private land, people licensed for somebody else. And the first, and this one registers the first and legal formal mining association. And we have tensions between the different stakeholders. We have the miners, we have the landowners, we have all these others. In the western region, it is also, mining there is taking place under a licensed company. It's, unlike these others, it's a homogeneous society, community, and it's a border mining site. So there's a lot of smuggling and trading things between the borders, and mining is under a gang team. This particular one, similar to the one in the south, in DRC, mining started much earlier. I mean, it's been going on, but because of instability, when there's instability, people run out. When there is a semblance of stability, people come back. And the one in southern Uganda, the land had been gazetted. So nobody has claim, but the government also doesn't have documentation, and they don't want to go into the gazetting of the 1960s or before. So we have those dynamics going on. What were the research objectives and research questions? It's a detailed slide. Please bear with us. We had three basic objectives, which we outlined there. And in the first objective, which was to advance knowledge about livelihoods in the sector and related power relations, we had two research questions. The second one was to deepen the understanding of barriers to women economic empowerment. And we had two research questions. And the third one was to contribute to the ongoing, anticipated and already started efforts to review and change the mining laws, mining policy and laws. So to answer those research questions, we also applied, like many others, several research methods to try to get to the root of what is really going on. And this was a cross-sectional study, and we did sequential use of the methods that we applied. So our first activity was the rationale of the project was to find out, to make the women who are involved in the ASSM visible in the sector, which is still widely perceived even by us that it's a masculine activity, but we find that it involves both men and women. So we wanted to make women visible on the sites, and we wanted to have the identification, the significant factors that the identification of sites with significant numbers of women. That was one of the criteria why we had to choose from the many different sites that are going on. So that was that. My colleague is going to go over the preliminary findings. And over to you, madam.
Okay, well, I think okay. I'm happy that I cannot see so far because it's showing me that I don't have any minutes left. So, so it will be quick. So just I wanted to say that substantive gender analysis in ASM, artisanal and small-scale mining, is still lacking of both sector and regimes designed to strengthen governance. So what I mean by that is that the women are, multiple roles and financial opportunities that ASM represents for women have been until recently largely ignored by policymakers who focused on encouraging women to leave the sector, understood as a place of too much risk for women and a place of economic and sexual exploitation. So very rapidly, I want to say also, maybe Abby have mentioned it, that we are really at the beginning of the analysis. And the survey, concerning the survey, we have, it's a quantitative and qualitative survey. We have only started to do the analysis for the quantitative data. So very, very rapidly, we can say that social and cultural norms play a major role in forming governance dynamics in all sites. Activities tend to be aligned to gender-ascribed roles. So women are doing panning, they are grinding, they are transporting water. In some sites, they are transporting wood. So it's really ascribed roles. Many women tend to be engaged in multiple activities at the sites. So women will maybe in the morning be grinding, in the afternoon panning, and another day they will be changing. It's not necessarily. They also pursue multiple livelihoods, because as you know, when if you're in a gold mining sites, when you're in the period of digging, only digging, you didn't hit the gold yet. So all the family, including men, children, women, well, you have to eat, so it's the responsibility of the women to go and do other activities. And also artisanal mining requires cooperation among actors. And this is according to different tasks and concern teams and individuals. So in one day, you can work for 5 hours or 4 hours as a team, and then for 2 hours alone. So the pros and cons of artisanal mining: insecurity, armed conflicts in DRC, demographic pressure on land in Rwanda, and reduced support for agriculture in Uganda push population into mining. Why? What's the pull? No, the pull is that because we can make money. Maybe we can make money fast, quick money with really high profits, and. But sustainable ASM livelihoods are not guaranteed or easy for women. For example, in Ituri, women are paid for transporting the mineral or for washing the mineral, but they will be paid in kind. So that means that they will be paid with the residue that may contain ore or may not contain ore. Okay. Oh, I have slide. Sorry. Okay, rapidly. This is preliminary findings based on our survey. We had done 778 surveys, representative sample of women and men. For the 6 sites, 48% of respondents are female and 52% are male. There are 3 times more men in Rwanda, in the sites in Rwanda, and 2.5 more women in South Kivu. Okay. Structural variables affecting women in ASM. Women are less likely to have schooling compared to men, ratio 1:4, and marital status appears not to have effect on women participation in ASM. Factors affecting women in artisanal mining. Women are less likely to be mobile than men, 30% versus 70% of men having worked at other mines. Men work more hours than women due to supervision, 79% versus 21%. Women work fewer days than men due to family obligation, 71% versus 29%. Women more likely engage into other income-generating activities than men, 83% versus 17%. Women stereotyped as weak, unclean, bring bad luck, and seen often as prostitute or free women or easy women. And lots of men, I think they really believe that digging is not safe for women, even if we know that women are breaking that stereotype, and they are actually digging. Oh, okay. Can I? Yeah. 1 minute. Okay. So I could say what type it works. You see that the majority of men do digging, and women are more like washing, as I have mentioned before. Also, the cooperation teams at mine site by gender, less than 69% of women work in teams compared to over 81% for men. 97% of surveyed men and women agree that working in teams is beneficial. And even the ones who don't work in teams, they do think also that it is beneficial to work as a team. Limitation of the research, I don't know what I should say. I have, 30 seconds now? Well, very hard to access information, informal and informal institution. A country like DRC that never did a census, even if you go to the administration of the territory, nobody can tell you how many people are living in the area where we're doing the study. The physical accessibility into the mine shafts also, it has been a challenge. And also complication with translating across many languages and between levels. Because just to take the survey was worked out in many language inputs from all the countries. Then we had the main survey in English, then it was again translated. Then the people went on the ground. They came back, and all the information we got in French from DRC, we had to translate it again. So it's a very big and long exercise. So the potential uptake of the findings: empower women artisanal miners by giving them a voice, highlight the challenges in the sector to inform both the state and other stakeholders, evidence-based information to feed into the mining law amendments, reforms, review, and launch awareness campaign highlighting barriers for women in the sector. And 10 seconds, please. Okay? No? Okay. Well, I'll put it so they can read, you know.
Okay, just the paper is very rich, it's very informative for us, and I think we can use it as a basis report for we have to go on the field on November. So we have to discuss how you deal with some problems. Okay, let me tackle the methodology. We have 778 individuals. But in the report, maybe because it's a preliminary report, there is no information about how you select the sites, how you select the site in countries, in DRC, in Rwanda, Uganda, and how people have been selected. In the report, you have around 48% of women in the sample. What does this figure mean? Because you don't mention anything how you select people. And another things are the norms and taboos reflected in your data. And I have to recognize that the presentation, your presentation is very clear and make irrelevant some comments have before listening to you. But another problem is research. Okay, do you intend to do multivariate analysis? Because in your methodology, I did not see anything, not in the report, not in what you presented. I think that with 778 individuals, you can do an econometric analysis, you can do multivariate analysis. That will provide more information, more explanations for the phenomenon you are studying. And tests for proportion. You show that some proportion. It will be better if you can do some tests for proportion, if the difference is significant or not. And one other thing. Yes.
Thanks for inviting me to comment on this. With the commodity boom we had the last 10 years, the prices of these minerals went up. So it became very attractive to get into these activities. Within these setups, within these informal setups, and the attractability of these activities, these mining sites became kind of nobody's lands, as you were pointing it out. This happened in Africa, this happened in Latin America, and the dynamics that happened there are very important to analyze, are very interesting to analyze. And the mining activity is an activity that for centuries have been also at the center of many myths and prejudices, such that female is not allowed to go into the mining sites, female should not go because it will give bad luck and so. Then one immediate outcome that should appear after this will be this kind of sorting, segregation, occupational segregation within those sites. One interesting question will be to try to look at what sort of activities are most segregated and what are not. This is something that you have on your data. You can explore a little bit further. And then, so what are the determinants of that sorting? And then for those places where female is, quote unquote, more accepted to get into, then in those particular places, do a more careful comparison of apples to apples and oranges to oranges in terms of, to equal conditions, to equal working conditions, what are the outcomes that these individuals get, that males and females will get, like in terms of earnings, in terms of job security, in terms of formality. I clearly understand these are very, very informal places, and as I started saying, kind of nobody's land, but to get into this kind of well-being objective well-being measures will be interesting, comparing at activities where males and females are both allowed to get into, and they are kind of comparable. This is also very important. Most of these activities are small-scale mining activities. Even though I was wondering,
how much capital is needed to get into that. If there is a need for capital, there is another avenue for gender disparities, because we know males' accessibility to capital differs from females. So how that may play a role into that will be also interesting to take a look at. And just to close, as I started with this conceptualization or general framework of the commodity boom, now that the prices of these minerals are going down, an interesting question will be to look at what's going on those places where prices are going down again. Just that. Thank you very much.
I would suggest that we move to the next presentation, and we'll take the questions after the second one. So next would be Gunatilaka, Women's Economic Empowerment in Northern Sri Lanka.
Keep it here. Yes, that's right. Thank you. I feel like something from Doctor Who with this on my head. Please excuse me, I'm rather tired. That video recording in the morning was quite exhausting. I can understand why film stars are paid so much money. I will try my best with this. Okay. Yeah. Let me turn this way. Is that all right? Because I can't see very well at this angle. This is the outline of our presentation, but there are some changes due to the fact that the time given was contracted. So we won't be talking much about the literature review of women's economic empowerment. Ranmini wrote the paper on that, and it's available out there. Please help yourself. Ketaki and I will be doing the presentation. I will go first, and she will go next. By now you have read that, so I don't need to read that, so I've saved some time. Most people know about the war in Sri Lanka, which lasted 30 years. It ended in 2009. And of course, since the war ended, there have been government and non-government efforts at promoting economic growth and employment in Sri Lanka's north and east. However, at the moment, there is little information about the spread and effectiveness of these programs, and in fact, I think many of them were implemented without any sort of baseline data about prevailing conditions. Recent data shows that poverty levels amongst women in the north are amongst the highest in the country, and that is particularly in the southern districts of the northern province, not so much in Jaffna, which is in the peninsula. What we are trying to do with this research is to look at the factors associated with women's economic empowerment in this post-conflict environment, women's labor force participation, and of course, whether the livelihood interventions which have been implemented are associated with any evidence of higher incomes amongst people who participated. So we use the livelihoods framework as a general framework in which to map out the economic environment, economic and sociocultural environment in which these interventions have been taking place. And part of the project has attempted to map out where these interventions have been implemented and by whom, because there is at present no central database about it. The data is quite fragmented. And we have used both quantitative and qualitative methods to collect the data, analyze it, and then triangulate the findings. So this you have seen before. Let me skip. The data and methods are set out in this diagram. The quantitative analysis is based on a very large survey. I should tell you that the national household income and expenditure surveys in Sri Lanka have about 25,000 households, of which Northern Province accounts for about 1,800 households. So given those figures, you can see that this is a very big survey, and we thought that it was important to do as big a survey as possible because there wasn't any data on these issues which had been collected previously, and because this would be a useful baseline for any future work. So of the households, 3,000 were female-headed, and 1,000 were households where the woman's partner or husband was also in the household. On hindsight, actually not on hindsight, at that time itself, I felt that we should have more male-headed households in our sample, because the majority of people in Northern Province come from households like that, and it is important to see what livelihood activities they do as well. But I was overruled. We have to make compromises with members of research teams, so that was a compromise. So the data was collected through a structured questionnaire. The qualitative component used mainly in-depth interviews of women heads of households. I should also say that the quantitative survey included members of all ethnic groups, the 3 main ethnic groups in the north, but since the qualitative survey was more limited, it concentrated more on the ethnic minorities, Muslims and Tamils. We also use case studies, focus group discussions and so on, and Côté will talk a little bit more about that. And there was this program, this project on mapping. These are the expected research outputs. I will just concentrate on the quantitative here. You can see we are looking at economic empowerment, labor force participation, and livelihood interventions. The qualitative is, the qualitative goes into depth and also into particular areas. And an interesting idea, this study on the impact of marriage on women's livelihood activities before, during, and after the war, based on the interviews which were conducted with individuals, is a recent addition, because we realized that the data set was so rich that we could do this study as well. So it has kind of grown a bit. Let me skip this. You can find all this without the nice infographics in Ranmani's paper, which is outside. This tells you something about the Sri Lankan experience with women's economic empowerment. As in India, labor force participation rates in Sri Lanka has been low nationwide. While the situation of Sri Lankan women is generally better than those of many South Asian women, there are still some discriminatory elements, particularly in terms of land laws. And of course, the armed conflict has added another layer of complexity to the existing situation. This is the sample overview, and what we are showing you here are the means of 2 subsamples, women-headed and male-headed. The samples are overwhelmingly dominated by one ethnic community, Tamils, who tend to be heavily concentrated in Northern Province, and there are small groups of Moors or Muslims and Sinhalese. You can see that labor force participation amongst women-headed households is on average much higher than amongst male-headed households. So we can see from this that there is likelihood of distress-driven participation in the labor market. In terms of education, what is disturbing and what I can't explain yet is that you find that there's a much higher proportion of women with primary education or less amongst the group of female-headed households than amongst the other group. And I really can't see how this may have happened, because the female-headed households, the sample was selected in such a way that first we identified the female-headed households randomly from administrative lists, and then selected the male-headed households as the third household from that particular household. So we need to go into the data a little bit more to look at this. And in terms of means, of course, per capita expenditure is actually higher amongst female-headed households. That could be due to outliers. We need to check that. I need to tell you that collecting this data was a challenge, and we are still in the process of cleaning much of the data. Estimation started relatively recently, and it's only during the last 3 weeks or so that Ranmini and I have been doing the estimations. You can see there are war-related experiences which I think make this study quite different from many of the other studies of this GrOW project. So you can see that a very high rate of displacement and the war-related experiences are very similar to between the female-headed and male-headed households, other than in the case of family members being killed or disappearing, and that of course is related to the fact, obviously, that one group is female-headed, and most likely because of the disappearance or a family member being killed. When we did this literature review, we found it difficult to get a handle on women's economic empowerment, in the sense, what could we use to measure it? And there is nothing in the literature, and listening to the problems associated with measurement this morning, and we are grateful to Madiha for changing the program so that we could listen to it this morning rather than do the video. There is an issue of defining any measurement. Of course, we didn't have the benefit of the workshop this morning when we set out to do this research. We only have this fairly old study by Hashimi and others where they compiled an empowerment index. And in fact, some years ago, I revised and adapted it to look at the impact of microfinance, involvement in microfinance on women's empowerment. Now that index is made up of these components, and we have tweaked the original index which Hashimi and others developed in order to suit our particular conditions. The indices were constructed as scale variables with different weights, and then we had a composite empowerment index, which I'm not sure at all works very well. So we are thinking of breaking this up and going more in terms of, single indicators, a series of single indicators, like people have been presenting today and were discussing. I would like to focus on the first one. This word kind of is not quite suited here. It's not a question of born. What we mean is the percentage share of total household expenditure over which the principal female respondent has control over, or rather the amount which she can decide how to spend. And this, I think, is an important distinction with existing views, because we think that in a way it doesn't really matter so much whether you're doing a job and you're earning a job. If your husband is earning a job and you can control the expenditure, great, go for it. I mean, at the practical level, I think this is what real empowerment is about. If you can, of course, earn money yourself and it's good for your self-esteem, you can get away from the kids, well and good. But the fundamental thing is how much of household expenditure you decide over. So that is what we have included there. Yeah, so you would have had time to read the rest. There are these constituents also. Again, we need to think a bit more carefully, particularly about major and minor family decisions. We learned a lot from this morning's session, where it was discussed how I'm afraid in this case we made all the mistakes that were highlighted in terms of our questionnaire. These are the explanatory variables we have looked at, and now how can I click that with this? Can I? I've linked a document. With this, I guess? Ah, yes, right. Oh, what is it saying? It says it couldn't open it. Okay, then shall we go to the folder and click it separately? It must be in the folder, I think. How do I go to that? Yes. It's session 7. Oh, I see. Those other documents were not up. Pardon? Yeah, yeah, in the same folder, yeah. I learned to do this hyperlink thing recently, so I wanted to use it. Ah, yes. Is it means or does it have stars? Yes. No, these are means. It's the other one. Yeah. Yes, this is it. Yes, so these are very preliminary results. We have already kind of estimated and re-estimated and refined, and we have come up with this, and this is certainly not the last word on the subject. So it was rather disappointing for us that so many of our variables kind of flopped. And usually in Sri Lanka, the education variables always, come up as significant. Here, only the higher education variables have come up. The others are not significant, and some of the signs are okay, because secondary education, yes. Anyway, household remittances from abroad increase the economic power, obviously. And then we have looked at some of the connectivity variables. So if you are remotely, if you live remotely, then of course it reduces your economic power, and I think that's a good finding in terms of policy. Oh, 2 minutes. Right, okay, sorry. I have to push on. Time won't wait for me. Oops, now I need to go back, is it? How do I... can we go back to the PowerPoint? Yes, well, now I will hand it over to Côté. She will give you some of the findings of the qualitative.
Okay, so since there's no much time, I'll just rush through it. So as Ramani stated, the objective of the quantitative study, the qualitative study was to complement the findings of the quantitative study, and this explored how economic empowerment is linked to several other socio-cultural factors. The qualitative study could probe into certain sensitive issues as caste and the situation regarding the ex-combatants, which could not be captured in the quantitative study. So now the analysis presented today is based on 25 cases chosen out from the 116 in-depth interviews of the larger qualitative study. And the theoretical framework for that particular paper, this is on the barriers to economic empowerment. We have used Naila Khabi's argument, where she had categorized the barriers to economic empowerment faced by women into 3 levels as individual, intermediate, and deep level. Sorry. So we have identified predominantly 5 themes, which are the financial issues, socio-cultural issues, lack of individual capacities, shortcomings in livelihood intervention, and security issues. I don't think, do I have time to present some of the? Okay, so so basically it had looked how each of these themes have further barricaded, have made those women further vulnerable, and have limited their options and opportunities to be economically empowered, or rather empowered. So I don't really have, okay, so I'll just go through this one. So this paper also looks at the most widely prevailing and constraining issues, and also looks at how these issues are interwoven. So issues do not stand individually, they all are interconnected. And we have analyzed how class, ethnicity, caste, and disability, those components, how those factors have further molded, like, you know, have further brought in more aspect to the barriers for economic empowerment of these women. This study analyzes the existing household dynamics, mainly the prevailing gender roles and gender stereotypes. So this kind of brought out a very interesting finding, which we can call as the dependent mentality. So what we found out through the few cases was that the women who have this kind of mentality has no intention, has no need to be employed or to earn. So they are quite comfortable being dependent, firstly on their father or brother, and then on their husband and son. And then finally, this paper also looks at variables such as the geographic, religious, ethnic identities to analyze how these factors make each case quite unique and personal, rather than like bringing out like more general themes and overarching themes. So yeah, with the time given, this is all. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for keeping it brief. Discussant for that paper.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting paper. So I just have some very brief comments. Firstly, I think it's a really important contribution to even be sort of collecting and generating data in a difficult context, particularly where it doesn't exist. There's no other source of data. So I think that that's really important. One of my comments was going to be sort of looking at the presentation, that another very important contribution could be that the interventions that have started should be mapped, and sort of the information on that collated in one place, which it seems you've already done. So that, again, I think in itself will be a great contribution. One of the things that stood out to me when I was sort of looking at the presentation is this is a context where ethnicity is an important dimension, and is perhaps particularly relevant, as is the relationship with the state. So I understand that you're looking at programs that NGOs started for women, and that the state started for women. But I got a sense that perhaps it might be quite interesting to look at how ethnic groups, including the men, and their relationship with the state. And this might be defined in terms of the trust that they have in state institutions, or the mistrust, for that matter, and the willingness to access whether it's government programs or other programs. But also sort of, and this might be quite a tricky thing to do, obviously, so the reality of the context might determine how much is possible and how much isn't. But how, if it's NGOs, is it NGOs, what about the identity of the NGOs and who the NGOs are and how they're helping these groups, and are they the same? You see, does the boundary of the ethnic group in some way? So does ethnicity intersect with the outcomes of the various programs that you're reviewing? The only other last comment, excuse me, is that it'd be great to hear a little more about how the qual and quant are speaking to one another, and what the design is, and in what ways. So for example, how did you go about selecting the qualitative case studies, and how did you go about selecting the qualitative cases to look at? Because such a rich survey and such a rich data set, if that can inform then which groups or which programs that you choose to go deeper into, that'd be fantastic. But thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to build on my colleague. I also found this study very interesting, and I compared it to the work we have done in Uganda, in the post-war northern Uganda. When I was reading this, I found those similarities of the positive and the negative impacts that the war can have on communities. But from what my colleague just discussed and what was presented, I got the feeling that this is an assessment of the programs that have taken place 7 years after the end of the war. And my feeling then was that these programs are they for just the northern part of the country, given the fact that the empowerment drive has, of course, coincided with what was going on in northern Sri Lanka, but it was also for the entire nation. So the background was sort of lacking information on what these programs entail. We are assessing something, unless the strategies had in them this empowerment drive, then we can look at what happened. If the strategies, both of the NGOs and the state, did not have that empowerment strategies inbuilt, it becomes very difficult to assess, to get to the core of whether or not there has been women's empowerment in the area. So I think we need to deal with that and add to the background of what these programs are, and whether or not, and the implementers, because if the implementers are detached from the community, where are they external people, are they internal people, that could have an effect on, like she said, self-exclusion. because the kind of people they are dealing with, they are disassociated. I think I have much more. Rest, I will send over.
Thank you very much. So now we can take questions from the audience. I would suggest 3 questions per presentations, and then the speakers will have the opportunity to get back to not only the comments that they receive from the discussants, but also from the audience. So 3 per paper, please. If any, of course. Yeah.
Okay, to increase my sugar level, so I have a question. Is for the first paper, and it comes back to a discussion we had earlier around norms of women's what constitutes a woman's job. A historian would not at all think that women do not work in mines. That's one thing I would say first. There was certainly in colonial India, and continues for a long time. I'm not that old, but you can read historical records, right? That's women came to work in those mines, and I think it's the same in southern Africa. And what you see happening over time is that, and I think this is very interesting to look at. The norms about what constitutes a man and a woman's job start evolving, and so I'm not making this point because the historical significance of this, but I think because if we continue to say it's like, oh, people use norms around it, it's almost like we're glancing over a very fundamental point that to me seems to be quite crucial for policies related to women's economic empowerment. Because if your policymakers continue to believe that there are things suited for men and women, legislation is often, like, women are prohibited to do certain things, carry more than X number of kgs. There's quite a number of countries that have those laws in place. If we don't address those issues, and with that not address the laws and the policies, I think it's like we continue to reinforce the stereotypes. And I'm not saying that I'm not at all saying that you do that, but I think there's a research issue there on those norms, who uses them, and what the implications of these are.
A question about the qualitative aspect in the Sri Lanka paper. You mentioned, I think you phrased called the dependent mentality, the idea that it's good to not work and be dependent on your father or your husband. I wonder if there was an age gradient to that, if for 2 reasons. One sort of cohort that it's a more traditional idea, maybe older women would have that. And then also because it's sort of a high-risk, high-return strategy. If it works out for you, your husband doesn't die or leave you or anything like that. And so maybe it's almost related to sort of ex-post rationalization, and that if you've made it through all those risks, then, hey, it was a good strategy, but where younger women might still be facing them.
One comment about mining is, I know in Africa, UNIFEM, the United Nations organization, is very active in trying to find ways with development partners to actually work on women. So lots of research out there, and policy programming being done. And certainly, I think you ways to find knowledge. And I think the point is that there's no knowledge from the people trying to create. For policymakers, because they think it's important to get involved, but there's also a vacuum of information. You mentioned about Sri Lanka. If we're looking at not only our individual projects, but how whole thing fits together. All getting different answers, and it seemed to be more than bimodal in terms of distributions.
Okay, so this. Please, could you take 2 minutes to address the comments? And,
maybe what I can say is that for the discussants, meant to be we're still really, and I think we mentioned we cannot draw conclusions. Like for concerning in Uganda, they have been they did the life histories. The survey, we're just beginning to analyze the quantitative data. We have never, not even begin to do the qualitative part. So yes, when we're doing, I'm addressing. When you talk about the proportion, yes, we are. Yes, we do consider that, like when we're taking each questions of the survey, and we say for UNIFEM, yeah, we are aware, and we are also solicited by UNIFEM, and actually we are trying to collaborate. No, I don't know. I'm kind of lost without
I think I will address the methodology and the sample. Yes, we glossed over it. But site selection were basically really purposeful because we wanted to go to sites where there were women. The study was about women. And even when we included men, the inclusion criteria was presence of women at all levels. The sample of the participants of the survey, we also made a conscious decision to get more women than men per site, although it didn't work. Obviously, there are more men, except in one area, but also the participants were sort of self-selecting. You'll appreciate the dynamics at the site. People don't have your time. I learned that from the focus groups discussion before we went into the survey. People just are not immersed in your interview, in your focus group. They just are going to do their own thing. So it's like you are wasting their time. So those who are included in the survey are those who are willing to spend we always told them it's 45 minutes, which is quite a lot to somebody who is pursuing something, and sometimes it will take longer. So it's those who are willing to see it through and are interested and had participated the earlier methods like participant observation and focus group discussion that were interested to sit down and answer the questions. So that's it. The analysis has been taken care of. We are just getting in there, so we did not say what kind of analysis is to be performed. And the norms and tradition has been sort of addressed. I didn't understand whether we are talking about, I think you clarified by talking about norms and tradition as far as women in artisanal mining is concerned. Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, but that's one of the rationale for us to go in there, because we realize that there are many. In Uganda, for example, the law, the mining, and was enacted in 2003. Already they are thinking of revising it. And so we thought that it would be a very good opportunity to inform them to incorporate the gender issues that have not been. And there have been a lot of surveys on artisanal mining, big surveys by the World Bank, but they are surveys, just that's what they are. And our study is mostly wanting to go into the qualitative, to say what the surveys really don't say. And we have also found that in these methodologies, we are talking to them, it's a different thing as a focus group discussion. When you go into the life history, which we have done in Uganda, the same lady who was vocal in the focus group discussion, when you put her on the side to tell you a life history, the information you get is quite different. So we are now beginning to understand the dynamics, why this information is either coinciding or is methodology to another.
Thank you very much for the comments, and almost all the comments related to one component of our study, and it is to do with livelihood interventions by donors. And the questions you raised will be very helpful for us when we analyze the data, because there are several research questions embedded in your comments, which we will try to answer when we begin the analysis of that particular schedule. Having said that, there are some questions you raised which I can address. For example, you wanted to know whether empowering women was inbuilt in the program. Well, you see, the problem with many donor-driven programs and government-driven programs is that they are not evidence-based. The exceptions, I would say, is the World Bank and increasingly the ADB, but they fund big projects like highways, restoring landing sites for fishing communities, that kind of thing. When it comes to livelihood interventions for women, those big donors who can finance research are not there. So what you find is that other donors and NGOs, they just kind of jump in without understanding the complexities of the situation. And in Sri Lanka's case, many interventions which were tried in the rest of the country and which were not very successful, I have to say, because of prevailing constraints, economic conditions, were kind of replicated in the post-conflict area. Now the thing is, donors are also under pressure, right? I mean, many people who left the country during the war make up electorates back home. So they have several objectives when they finance projects. They have to be seen to be doing something, particularly when an election is around the corner, and they don't necessarily have the money like IDRC has to finance research and make their interventions evidence-based. So this is the problem we are faced with. But our questionnaire has a lot of information on who the donors were, whether it was government, whether it was some other donor. And as far as government is concerned, as far as the public are concerned, they are mainly, poetry and textile and some is study on a particular NGO intervention, and it's quite a well-known intervention. And I will leave it to her.
The two case studies, the one I'm doing it looks at the private sector interventions. So apparel sector industry is one of the largest industries in the north right now. So the other one was to look at the NGO interventions, and my colleague conducted that case study. We looked at the CAN International project that was to train about 25 women in kinochi, weaving, like handloom weaving. So the machines were given, and the training was there for about 6 months. And then all the material was given, and then so that was the design of the project. So now, but now the project has come to an end. So now they are looking at how these women can produce their goods and put them into the market, and build up a market for those products. There are several issues raised, not only in the design of that project, but the issues came out with regard to the time that women can allocate. Like some women are quite hesitant to come and be trained for about 8 hours for a day, whereas they have to look after their kids and do all the household work as well. Can I also answer the question on the dependent mentality? Yeah. So, if you can see the two quotations used, like this is from a 25-year-old Tamil Hindu woman from Vaunia. And dependent mentality here, what I meant was not only earning, but also in terms of decision making. If you see the first quotation, so before she makes a decision, she speaks to the father, to the brother, then father and mother, and then she decides. And also this dependent mentality works on both ways, where the stereotypical image, like role, is that the woman is the primary caregiver, whereas the man is the breadwinner of the family. So the second quote, as you can see, so the husband is he's sick and he can't earn, but still he does not want the wife to go out and work and earn. So this is like to challenge that gender role. So that is what I meant by dependent mentality.
Finding is that with the inflow of remittances from relatives who are abroad, even young people don't want to work. So there is that that remittance dependency culture, which is quite unusual, I would say, for the northern province, because the northern province has always been a migrant worker culture. Even during British times, educated young Tamils went to what was known as Malaya to work in the railways, and they would send the money, and the money would be invested in land or houses and so on. But there seems to be a breakdown in that kind of, thrifty, resourceful sort of culture, which may is due to disruptions.
I'd like to just say that the same thing is happening for Sudanese in Uganda. They get a lot of money, and that's from the donor or from somebody. But if you want to sell something, the Sudanese will buy it because now they have a lot of money, and that whether it's donor or remittances, there is this wave of somebody is going to provide the money because I'm a victim. And I don't want to do anything about it because I'm a victim and the money will always come. So it permeates in all these post-war situations. Another one, if you can allow me, that I noticed in northern Uganda was displacement, the effect of displacement on the communities. Those who had stayed in camps for some time, they had water, they had a clinic around them, they had all this, and they were exposed to the international news and everything. Them going back to the camps, the women were asking, why should I go back? I'm a widow, I don't know where the land is. Even if I went, the male, the brothers-in-law are going to ask me, and when my child is sick now, I can always run to the clinic because it is in the camp. There is water. Why should I go back? So that was a revealing thing for me because I'm not interested in going. Now I'm living a different life. It wasn't, I'm not ready to go.
Let's say thank you to all participants and the discussants. Now we're going to wrap up this session, and Madika is going to tell us about housekeeping rules and the way forward.